Hello, I'm Sophie Ikenya. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. Celebrations in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, as protesters hear President Omar Al-Bashir has been removed from office.
The head of the regime has been removed and it's being held in a secure place.
But despite the celebrations, some protesters say they'll continue until there are free and fair elections.
The protest will go on until the Sudanese people are assured that their revolution will not be stolen from them.
An Ebola spike in DRC as 18 new confirmed cases are reported in a single day. Also in the program, addressing double standards. The new movie Between focuses on an African woman's desire to find love without being judged for her choices.
That's the particular reason why we wanted the lead character to be African, just so that we start the conversation about African women and how we're seen, how we're treated and all of that.
And in sports, the seedings for this year's Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt have been released ahead of Friday's draw in Cairo. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Omar Al-Bashir has been overthrown as president of Sudan. The military has now taken over. A 3-month state of emergency has been imposed and all political prisoners in the country have been released. Now, it comes after thousands of protesters spent a 5th night demanding that Al-Bashir step down. We begin our coverage with the announcement from the Sudanese defense minister.
Therefore, I would like to announce the defense minister and the chair of the Security Council, that the regime, the head of the regime, has been removed and it's being held in a secure place. I, as the defense minister and the head of the chairman of the Supreme Committee, I announced that the former head of the regime has been removed and is in a safe place. I announced the formation of a transitional military council that will manage the matters during the period of 2 years.
Well, thousands of people are still on the streets of the capital. There have been celebrations, but many are also vowing to continue their protests, demanding free and fair elections straight away.
To see Bashir stepping down is enough for us. Oh, our young people, this is such a big joy. This revolution belongs to the youth. Our youth is vigilant, and the world is looking up to our country now.
The protest will go on until the Sudanese people are assured that their revolution will not be stolen from them.
Well, joining me now is Sarah Abdel Galil, a spokesperson for the Sudanese Professionals Association. That's the umbrella group behind the protest. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on the program. You are not really happy with the results of today, even though President Omar al-Bashir has been ousted. Why?
This is part of what we wanted. The regime is still there. The first request in the Declaration of Freedom and Change is the step down and handover of Omar al-Bashir and the regime, unconditionally and peacefully. Today, it took the people of Sudan about 30 seconds to 1 minute to make up their mind, and it's not some of them. The majority, if not everybody, feels like this is not what we want. What we want is a civil transitional government.
Now, the question on people's minds now is, look, do you honestly believe, even if you continue with the protest, that the military will give up control?
We still believe that in the military there are, officers who will support the transition to a civil government. The senior officers are pro-National Congress Party. They are part of what was known as the Islamic Front political group.
But they are not included in this composition.
They are leading in this council. So the person who came today and spoke, Awad Ibn Auf, is part of this pro-government.
What do you make of the composition of this council now?
Obviously, we don't know who are the members, but we think, for example, there may be the National Intelligence Service boss there who has been, violating and being aggressive and doing everything that people of Sudan really, are not happy about, and he should be subjected to transitional justice, not to come and rule us. So what we see is a regression rather than progression. We feel like this was just a recycling process, and trying to tailor it in a way to say, look, Omar al-Bashir has left, everything is fine, go back home. But we're not going back home.
What was your proposal, and how do we know that it would have been successful? Because really, you are not a political organization. How do you bridge that gap?
We have bridged that gap already by working with our alliance, because there is now the Forces for Freedom and Change. This includes political parties, include professionals, includes civil societies, include community leaders. So we are a mixture, a mosaic group that reflects the whole of Sudan. People were planning, like last weekend in London, we had the Alternative Health Policy Conference, where we have endorsed a transitional sort of policy in the transitional period. So we are preparing for it, and we have all of the experts and the competent people to lead Sudan. This regime is a regime that's failed miserably.
All right, we have to leave it there, because this is obviously a subject that will carry on for the next few days. Thank you for taking time to talk to us. Well, let's now take a closer look now at Omar al-Bashir. He spent 3 decades as Sudan's head of state, and for many young people, he's the only president they have ever known. And so he looks back at his time in power.
Omar al-Bashir, a dominant figure in Sudan's politics, divisive at home and defiant to the West. The former paratrooper took power through a military coup in 1989. War was the hallmark of much of his rule. The Muslim North, where he comes from, fought against rebels in the mainly Christian and animist South in one of the world's longest civil wars. Another war was fought in Western Darfur amid claims of marginalization by the non-Arab ethnic groups. The government bombed the region from above and unleashed Janjaweed militia against the people. Hundreds of thousands died, and Omar al-Bashir was indicted by the International Criminal Court for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity.
This is a politicized tribunal. You have seen how the huge crowds came to greet me in Darfur. These are the same crowds I'm accused of committing genocide and ethnic cleansing against. This is why I've defied the tribunal and have been travelling freely around the world.
Do hereby swear by the Almighty God.
Meanwhile, the North-South war ended with a peace deal in 2005 and secession by the South 6 years later. Sudan lost most of its oil fields to the south, but it retained leverage with refineries located in the north. But the country's economy suffered badly. Rising prices of bread and fuel and foreign currency shortages pushed people to the streets. Initially, demonstrations were quashed, often brutally, by Bashir's forces.
It's clear to us that there is no shortage of foreign currency in the national economy because all kinds of goods are available and in big quantities. But there is greedy speculation between currency traders and gold and food smugglers. And there are minorities controlling everything, even the banking system.
Last December, professional associations rallied together and protests grew bigger and bigger. But al-Bashir was still not prepared to quit.
Firstly, I announce a state of emergency across the country for 1 year. Secondly, dissolving the government at the federal level and at the provincial level. We will then follow with taking the appropriate measures and decisions to apply everything we've just mentioned.
On Saturday, protesters made it as far as the army headquarters for the first time. It's right next to the president's compound. Repeated attempts by the security forces to break up protests failed. And then, this critical moment. Clashes between the National Intelligence and Security Services and the military sealed Al-Bashir's fate. He has been a towering figure in Sudanese politics. A sharp rise in the cost of living and long-term anger over corruption finally brought his rule to an end. But his military government still has deep roots. Change is what people have asked for, but they will be wondering how deep it goes. And so, BBC News.
Well, we've been getting reaction to developments in Sudan, and the African Union says the military takeover is not the appropriate response to the challenges facing Sudan and the aspirations of its people. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Foreign Minister Geoffrey Onyeama says that there should be no violence and that constitutional order should be restored as soon as possible. Well, let's explore some of the concerns raised earlier, and I'm joined by Dr. Hassan Kanenje from the Horn Institute in Nairobi. Thank you for taking time to talk to us on the program. Is it really easy to tell whether the military is genuine on about what they've done and what they actually plan to do?
At this stage, you can't tell how genuine the military is, but I think the next couple of days is going to determine just how genuine they are. And in part because, frankly, the change that most Sudanese were expecting has fallen short. I think largely because they were expecting some kind of a civilian government, transitional government, to be able to continue or rather restore the constitutional order. And the state of emergency, of course, we know part of the genesis of this crisis has been the runaway inflation and just the poor economy that has been unsustainable to most and average Sudanese people.
Given the composition of the military and what people are saying, there could be factions within the military. What happens then if the protesters continue to demonstrate outside of the military headquarters?
There's a chance that Sudan may descend actually into civil war. It's true that President Bashir still has some loyalists within the intelligence and within certain segments of security services. And so how the current military regime is going to manage the transition in the next several days, I think is going to determine whether or not there's going to be peace. Now, it is important to note that a lot of Sudanese are unlikely to stop this protest, in part because most of the current people in government, or at least within the military infrastructure, they are more or less the same people who are with President Al-Bashir. And I don't think a lot of Sudanese are very hopeful at this stage. We expect the protest to continue.
What should the military be doing now, really, that is realistic?
It would have been advisable for the military to provide a much shorter transitional period, but also make sure that there is a caretaker government that is actually run by a civilian and not the military people. I think that is likely to give more hope to more Sudanese, as opposed to seeing the same military men who've literally bastardized the country for the last 30 years, again promising to bring about change that were promised about 30 years ago, and they never happened.
Is it really easy for the military to hand over power after a transition period? What kind of a situation are we looking at?
Military people tend to make the worst politicians because they are not trained in the art of statecraft. And because of that, unless there is an intervention or perhaps external pressure to ensure the constitutional order is restored, for them to test the politics and power is going to be extremely dangerous for Sudan. And I think this is about the time the international community has to bring pressure to bear on the current military government to make sure they actually allow that to happen. Otherwise, as we've known from history and in this part of the world, the militaries do not do politics very well.
All right, Dr. Hassan Kanenje from the Horn Institute, thank you very much indeed for your insights into that situation in Sudan. And you can follow all the latest developments on the military takeover of Sudan. That's including analyses on what could happen next on our website. That's at bbc.com/news. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Sophie Ikenye. Still to come, Peter with all the sports news as the Golf Masters tease off a look at some of the Africans in the mix. I'm Sophie Ikenye and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program, Omar Al-Bashir has been removed as president of Sudan. The military is now in charge of the country and a 3-month state of emergency has been imposed. Well, let's turn to Libya now because the United Nations has called for immediate ceasefire in the country to avoid what it refers to as a dramatic, bloody battle for Tripoli. The UN says at least 56 people have been killed and up to 6,000 others left homeless from fighting in the last week. At least 18 new confirmed Ebola cases have been reported in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the largest increase in the country has seen in a single day since the start of the outbreak in August. Gaius Kowene has the latest.
Members of the response team that I spoke to from the town of Butembo, that's in eastern DRC, told me that this high rise of number of cases is due to the fact that in the last month alone, there were at least 4 attacks on Ebola treatment centers, and that made it very hard for them to follow up and vaccinate those who were in touch with confirmed cases of Ebola. Now, the World Health Organization is organizing a meeting in Geneva this Friday where they will discuss and ascertain whether to declare Ebola a health emergency of international concern. And this is the 10th outbreak to hit the DRC, and so far more than 1,000 people have contracted the virus and over 700 died from it, making it the deadliest to hit the country in the past 4 decades. Reporting from Kinshasa, I am Gaius Kowene for Focus on Africa.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport.
You like golf? That's what we're starting today. Yes, the star-studded affair known as the 2019 Masters got underway at Augusta National today. Several top players are seeking their first green jacket, what you get when you win, or looking to add another to their collection and vying for the sport's top prize throughout the extended weekend in Augusta. Tiger Woods is playing in his 2nd straight Masters since missing consecutive events. Rory McIlroy is still looking for his first green jacket, while Jordan Spieth is trying to overcome some season-long demons and get back into winning ways. 6 South Africans are also in the mix, including Trevor Immelman and Charles Schwartzel, seen here, both winners in 2008 and 2011 respectively, and Louis Oosthuizen, who was runner-up in 2012. Now, football and the seedings for this year's Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt have been released ahead of Friday's draw in Cairo. The pots were decided based on the latest FIFA World Rankings, so the 4 highest-placed African teams, Senegal, Tunisia, Nigeria and Morocco, are in pot 1 alongside hosts Egypt and defending champions Cameroon. Ivory Coast, Ghana are in pot 2 with Mali, Guinea, the DR Congo and Algeria. South Africa, Uganda, Benin, Mauritania, Madagascar and Kenya make up pot 3. While pot 4 contains Zimbabwe, Namibia, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Tanzania and Burundi. Now, all 4 quarterfinals for the Europa League kick off in just over an hour. Slavia Prague host Chelsea, while Benfica are at home to German side Frankfurt, and it's Villarreal versus Valencia. Gabon forward Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is in line for start with Arsenal against Napoli. Illness had restricted the forward to substitute appearances in Arsenal's past 2 Premier League matches, but manager Unai Emery says he's fit to start. In some other football news, an investigation is to take place in Ghana after a female FIFA referee was assaulted during a match on Sunday. Fans and players felt the match should have had more injury time at the end of the game between Prisons FC Women and Ampem Dakoa, who won the game 1-0. Now, this weekend's Second League Confederation Cup quarter-final match between Sudanese club Al Hilal and Tunisian side Etoile du Sahel has been postponed due to the current protests in Khartoum. The game was to have been played on Sunday, with Etoile leading 3-1 from the first leg. The Ethiopia Football Federation has admitted it is behind schedule on preparations to host the 2020 African Nations Championship and doubts it will be ready on time. A CAF inspection team visited Ethiopia over a month ago, but is yet to release its findings. Finally, Spain and Atletico Madrid striker Diego Costa has been banned for 8 games after being found guilty of abusing a referee. He received a 4-game suspension for insulting the referee and a further 4 games for grabbing the official's arm. It means he will miss Atletico's remaining games this season. The 30-year-old, though, can appeal against the ban. Finally, how about this for discovering you've been dropped by your club? Former France and Chelsea winger Florent Malouda, now a coach, appeared to be totally unaware of his release by FC Zurich until the club posted it on their social media channels, stating there had been a mutual agreement over his exit. The Swiss side took to Twitter to say FC Zurich and Florent Malouda have decided by mutual agreement to end the recently started cooperation. We wish him the best of luck and success in his future career. Only for the 38-year-old to respond with his own tweet. Really? I didn't know that. How's that for getting sacked?
I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't
That's just
like
sports, Sophie.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Oh, wow. Now, Stella Damasas is one of Nigeria's top Nollywood actors with over 100 movies to her name. She stars in a new movie called Between. The film follows a young woman's struggle to find love whilst also addressing the double standards women sometimes face. The actress sat down with the BBC's Victoria Uwankunda ahead of the London premiere on Friday.
We never met. Bye. It's a story about a woman, Chelsea Hollis, the character that I play. It's a leading lady. She's African, who has been married like 4 times and lost all hope in relationships and in love, but is crazily a marriage therapist, you know, who's trying to fix other people, but her life is a mess. Pick up some random chick, sleep with her, and he'll be called badass.
You said that the movie was to spark a conversation. But yet there is also this thing that there are double standards in our societies. We have a man does this thing, he goes with women, he's a stallion, he's a stud.
We still have a long way to go. It has started, the movement has started. You know, there's Me Too, there's equality, there's a lot of things here. But the thing that we're trying to do is also to know that even as an African, you know, there's a point we get to, we also have to start thinking of African women as strong women. It doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, you have the right to be promiscuous. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying, see us as humans too. Men have flaws, they make their mistakes, they do things wrong sometimes. But when we do it, you know, cut us some slack. We're human, we're strong, you know, it's different. So we still, and that's the particular reason why we wanted the lead character to be African, just so that we start the conversation about African women and how we're seen, how we're treated and all of that.
Are you still doing your activism? I know you had a hashtag, Not Child Brides.
It is a big problem. The early marriage thing, we've been fighting it, and a lot of people back home are still using religion as an excuse, you know, for me, I call that a violation of the child's rights. It's against the human rights, and it affects education as well, which is another thing that I'm fighting against as well, because once you marry these young girls at that early age, automatically their education stops. Shouting about it is not enough. They should start putting these fathers in jail. Their father that will sell an 11-year-old to marriage, throw him in jail, so they know that you can't do that to a child.
Nigerian actor there, Stella Damasas. Well, before we go, let's take a quick look at our top story today on Focus on Africa. Omar Al-Bashir has been overthrown as president of Sudan. The military has now taken over. A 3-month state of emergency has been imposed, and all political prisoners in the country have been released. The army is warning it will enforce a nighttime curfew. That's all from the program. From me and the rest of the Focus on Africa team, thank you for your company.